welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The barren land stretched out before them like a scar on the earth, twisted and devoid of life, where nothing grew, and even the wind seemed to carry the scent of death. Arthur stood at the edge of the wastelands, his eyes narrowing against the harsh light of the setting sun. He felt the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. Beside him, the knights waited in silence. Lancelot, ever the stalwart Gawain, restless with energy Percival, quiet and steady, and Galahad, the youngest and most idealistic of them all. They were his most trusted, the men he had led into countless battles, and yet, this journey felt different. It wasn't just another quest for glory. This was a trial, not only for him as king but for them all. Merlin's warning echoed in his mind, the Grail has reappeared, but it is not as you knew it. Morgana's darkness taints its power. Only by proving yourself worthy in every sense of the word can you hope to reclaim it. Arthur clenched his fists, the leather of his gauntlets creaking under the pressure. He had faced many enemies before, real monsters, armies, and traitors, but none quite like Morgana. Her power was subtle and insidious, seeping into the cracks of his kingdom, poisoning his people's hearts with doubt. He turned to his knights. This will not be easy. Each of us will face trials unlike anything we've encountered. Stay strong, stay true, and together we'll bring the Grail back to Camelot. Lancelot nodded, his face set in grim determination. We've followed you through worse, my king. Whatever Morgana has planned, we'll see it through. Galahad, the most devout among them, crossed himself and whispered a prayer. God is with us. With those words, they stepped forward into the wastelands, leaving behind the safety of Camelot's borders and entering a realm where nothing was as it seemed. The wastelands were aptly named. For miles, nothing but jagged rocks and twisted trees lined their path. The sky, an unnatural shade of gray, seemed to hang low, oppressive, as if watching their every move. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, as though the land itself wanted them gone. Each step felt heavier than the last, the ground beneath their feet shifting unpredictably, forcing them to constantly adjust their footing. Does anyone else feel like we're walking in circles? Gawain muttered, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword as his eyes darted to the horizon. Arthur had noticed it too. The landscape seemed to bend and twist, defying logic and geometry. One moment, a distant mountain would loom on their right, the next, it was gone, replaced by a deep chasm. Morgana's magic was at work here. The wastelands were not just a physical place, yet they were a reflection of the mind, a place where doubts and fears became manifest. We need to stay focused, Arthur said, his voice firm. Whatever we face here, it's designed to break us. But we're stronger than this. Remember why we're here. As they pressed on, the shadows around them deepened. Shapes began to move within the darkness, at first just out of the corner of the eye, fleeting and indistinct. But soon, those shapes grew more defined. Human-like figures, pale and translucent, emerged from the rocks and trees. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow. These are the spirits of those who failed to find the Grail. Merlin had warned them before they set out. They are neither living nor dead, trapped in eternal limbo, their souls twisted by Morgana's magic. The knights drew their weapons, forming a protective circle around Arthur. But the spirits did not attack. Instead, they hovered just out of reach, whispering words that chilled the soul. Unworthy a broken bar, coward a broken bar, traitor a broken bar. They targeted each knight in turn, their voices dripping with malice. Lancelot stiffened as one of the spirits floated toward him, its eyes gleaming with accusation. You betrayed your king on a broken bar, you will do it again. Arthur saw the flash of guilt in Lancelot's eyes and knew the spirit's words had struck home. Lancelot had never forgiven himself for his affair with Guinevere, despite Arthur's attempts to reassure him. Morgana knew exactly where to strike. Gawain flinched as another spirit hissed in his ear. You failed to save your brother a broken bar, you are no knight, only a coward hiding behind a sword. Percival, too, was not spared. You hesitate a broken bar, you doubt a broken bar, you are weak. Even Galahad, pure of heart as he was not immune to the spirit's venom. You are too young, too naive tilde Macron v. You will never be ready. Arthur felt the weight of his night's struggles, but he knew that this was his trial as much as theirs. He stepped forward, meeting the gaze of the nearest spirit. You will not break us, he said, his voice steady. We are not defined by our past mistakes. We are defined by our will to rise above them. The spirit recoiled, hissing in frustration, but Arthur did not relent. He turned to Lancelot, laying a hand on his shoulder. You are my brother, Lancelot. Whatever has passed between us is forgiven. You are a knight of Camelot, and I trust you with my life. Lancelot's eyes softened, and he nodded, his resolve strengthening. One by one, Arthur spoke to each of his knights, reminding them of their worth, of the oaths they had sworn to protect the kingdom. Slowly, the spirits began to fade, their whispers losing power in the face of Arthur's unwavering belief. As the last of the spirits disappeared, the path ahead became clear. A crumbling stone altar stood in the distance, its surface covered in strange runes. A figure knelt before it, draped in tattered armor, a former knight of Camelot, long since lost to the Wastelands. His gaunt face turned toward them, eyes filled with regret. I failed a broken bar, the knight whispered, his voice hollow. I was not worthy a broken bar. Arthur knelt beside the fallen knight, placing a hand on his cold armor. None of us are perfect. But that does not mean we stop trying. Your failure does not define you. The knight's form shimmered, as though Arthur's words had freed him from the curse of the Wastelands. With a final sigh, the spirit faded away, leaving behind a faint glimmer of light. The path forward was now open. They pressed on, deeper into the Wastelands. The terrain shifted again, this time into a twisting maze of jagged rocks and narrow passageways. The walls seemed to close in on them, turning the landscape into a claustrophobic labyrinth. But it wasn't just the physical challenge that threatened them now, it was the weight of their own minds. Arthur could feel a subtle pressure, a gnawing doubt at the back of his mind. Morgana's influence was growing stronger the closer they got to the Grail. She was testing them, not just physically but mentally, searching for any weakness she could exploit. Suddenly, the air grew thick with fog, and the maze seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Arthur could no longer see his knights. Panic flared in his chest, but he forced it down. He knew this was another of Morgana's tricks, a trial designed to test his resolve. Stay calm, he called out, though he wasn't sure if his voice reached the others. We need to stay together. But the fog only thickened, swallowing his words. Arthur strained to listen, but the only sound was the beating of his own heart. And then, slowly, he began to hear voices, soft at first, but growing louder, more insistent. You are not the true king of Broken Bar. The voice was familiar, yet distant, echoing from the depths of his mind. Arthur froze, his grip tightening on Excalibur. He knew who it was, Morgana. Her voice slithered through the fog, wrapping around his thoughts like a vice. You were never meant to rule. You stole the throne. You are a pretender, Broken Bar. Arthur's jaw clenched, but he refused to be swayed. No, he said, his voice firm. I am the king of Camelot, and I will not let you poison my mind. But Morgana's voice only grew stronger, laced with venom. Do you think your knights truly follow you out of loyalty? They follow because they have no choice. They pity you, Arthur. They see your weakness, your doubt. Arthur's heart pounded in his chest, but he knew better than to listen to her lies. He had fought too long, too hard, to be swayed by the whispers of a sorceress. Yet, as he pressed forward through the fog, doubt began to creep in. What if she was right? What if he wasn't the king Camelot needed? With each step, the fog grew denser, and the maze twisted in on itself, disorienting Arthur further. He couldn't tell how long he'd been walking. The minutes felt like hours, and hours like days. The voices continued to haunt him, Morgana's taunts weaving together with his own doubts. Finally, just when he thought he could walk no further, The fog lifted. Arthur found himself standing at the center of the maze, a clearing bathed in an eerie, unnatural light. In the center of the clearing stood a stone pedestal. Arthur and his knights pressed forward, the oppressive atmosphere of the wastelands weighing heavily on their spirits. As they journeyed deeper into the desolate landscape, the sun began to set, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and warp, creating eerie shapes that danced at the periphery of their vision. The knights maintained a steady pace, their faces set in resolute determination, but the oppressive silence was unsettling. The land itself seemed to groan and shift beneath them, as though it were alive and aware of their intrusion. The first sign of trouble came when the ground beneath them suddenly began to tremble. Arthur and his companions froze, their eyes scanning the horizon for the source of the disturbance. The ground cracked open with a deafening roar, and out of the fissures emerged spectral figures, pale and gaunt, their eyes hollow and their expressions twisted in anguish. These were the lost souls, trapped in the wastelands by Morgana's dark magic. The spectral figures moved with a slow, deliberate grace, their forms shifting and swirling like mist. They were once knights of Camelot, noble warriors who had come seeking the Grail and had been ensnared by Morgana's spell. Now, they were bound to this place, forever lost between life and death. Arthur drew his sword, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that these spirits were not to be taken lightly. They were embodiments of the despair and defeat that Morgana had cultivated in this forsaken land. The knights fanned out, preparing to face the apparitions, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. One of the lost souls advanced toward Lancelot, its hollow eyes fixed on him. The once great knight had to confront the specter of his own past filled with guilt and regret. The apparition spoke in a voice that was both mournful and accusatory. "You sought the Grail for glory, Lancelot, but what did you find? Failure and despair." Lancelot's face hardened, his grip tightening on his sword. "I sought it for honor and for Camelot. If you are here to judge me, then know that I will not falter now." The spectral figure let out a chilling wail, and the ground beneath them heaved. The confrontation was fierce, but Lancelot's resolve was unwavering. With a powerful swing of his sword, he banished the spirit, which dissolved into a wisp of dark smoke. Meanwhile, Percival faced a different challenge. The specter before him was not just a manifestation of his fears but a reflection of his own failures. It whispered accusations and doubts, questioning his faith and his role as a knight. Percival's faith was his greatest strength, and he drew upon it to face the apparition. He uttered a prayer and, with renewed determination, struck down the specter, freeing its tormented soul. Arthur's own trial was yet to come. As the last of the lost souls was defeated, a great chasm opened up in the ground before him. From it emerged a figure cloaked in shadows and Morgana herself, her eyes glowing with malevolent glee. She stepped forward, her presence commanding and darkly beautiful. "So, you've made it this far, Arthur." Morgana's voice was like silk, but it dripped with venom. "You think you can reclaim the Grail from my grasp? You are a fool to challenge me." Arthur tightened his grip on his sword, his mind racing. "The Grail belongs to Camelot, not to you. Your darkness will not prevail." Morgana laughed, a sound that echoed through the wastelands like a mournful dirge. "You think you can save your kingdom with mere courage and strength? The Grail's power is mine to command. To reclaim it, you must prove yourself worthy beyond the confines of this realm." With a flick of her wrist, Morgana conjured a blinding light that enveloped Arthur, transporting him to a new, more foreboding landscape. He found himself in a cavern filled with ancient, cryptic symbols etched into the walls. The air was thick with magic, and at the center of the cavern stood a pedestal upon which the Grail rested, its radiant beauty tainted by dark, swirling shadows. Arthur approached the Grail, but as he neared it, the shadows around it coalesced into a monstrous form, a creature of darkness with eyes like burning coals and claws that dripped with venom. This was Morgana's final trial, a beast born of her dark magic, a guardian designed to test his very soul. The beast roared and lunged at Arthur, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. Arthur dodged and countered, his movements fluid and precise. The battle was fierce and exhausting, each clash of steel and found resonating through the cavern. Arthur's heart raced, but he focused on the Grail, knowing that its recovery was the key to saving his kingdom. As the battle raged on, Arthur's thoughts turned to his people, his kingdom's suffering, his knights' sacrifices, and his own doubts. He drew strength from these thoughts, channeling his determination into each strike. With a final, powerful blow, he struck the beast down, its form dissipating into shadows. Arthur approached the Grail, his breath coming in ragged gasps. As he reached out for it, the dark shadows receded, and the Grail's radiant light returned, pure and untainted. He held it aloft, feeling its power course through him, a source of strength and hope. The cavern began to crumble around him, and Arthur was transported back to the Wastelands, where his knights awaited him. They looked at him with a mixture of relief and awe as he emerged, the Grail in hand. Morgana's dark influence had been broken, and the Grail's power was restored to its rightful place. The knights gathered around Arthur, their faces filled with pride and gratitude. The trials they had faced had tested their resolve, but together they had triumphed. Arthur knew that this victory was not just about reclaiming the Grail but reaffirming the bond between him and his knights, and between him and his people. As they made their way back to Camelot, the Wastelands seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as they left. The land would heal, and so too would the kingdom, thanks to the courage and determination of Arthur and his knights. When they arrived at Camelot, the people greeted them with cheers and joy. The Grail was returned to its rightful place, and the kingdom began to flourish once more. Arthur stood before his people, the weight of his trials now replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and hope. He knew that the challenges ahead would be many, but with the strength of his knights and the support of his people, he was ready to face them. And so, Arthur and his knights continued to lead Camelot into a new era of prosperity, their bond forged through trials and triumphs, their hearts united in their shared purpose. The legend of the Holy Grail lived on, a testament to their courage and the enduring spirit of Camelot.